So, what's in the box? The question itself is a clue. Reason. Good answer. What else? Tools. Yes, that's a good answer too. Reason tools. Starting to put thinking. Good, good. All of this is true in a sense. That's what's in there. And we're going to get a little bit more specific than that. If we want to live beautiful lives, if we want to make the most of this time we have on earth, fill our lives with joy and pleasure and friendships and purpose and meaning and all the things that constitute a beautiful human life, we have to figure out how to do that. We're not born with this knowledge. And you don't get it through social osmosis. People, how many people out there are genuinely loving their lives fully and deeply and richly? Probably not a lot if you really got into the nuts and bolts of it, because many people accept ideas that are contrary to living and loving life. The whole moral code that says you should sacrifice your values, you should give up your values for the sake of others rather than pursue your values for your own sake. That right there is a divide between what you're allegedly supposed to do, how you're allegedly supposed to live, and the pursuit of a beautiful, fun, happy, meaningful life. So we don't know how to do this thing automatically. We don't acquire that knowledge automatically. We have to figure it out. Well, how do we figure it out? How do we figure out what to do? We think. We look at reality. We observe the facts before our eyes. We listen, we look, we touch, taste, smell. We use our senses. And what do we do with that data? We conceptualize it. We bring it in, we create concepts and propositions, bird, dog, cat. Here's how you can do this thing. This causes that. Oh, if I do this, I can do that, etc. Right? We use causal reasoning, and the fundamental unit of all of this thinking is concepts. We use concepts. Concepts are single, or they're denoted by a single word that represents a group of things. Man is a concept that represents all men. Swimming is a concept that represents an activity and all instances of that activity. Those are concepts. These are the fundamental tools of thinking. Putting those together, we form propositions, sentences, statements, generalizations, and ultimately principles. Things like, in order to live, people must be free, and the like. So there are a lot of tools that constitute thinking tools: perceptions, concepts, propositions, generalizations. But there's one particular tool that is, in a sense, more powerful than any of those. And it consists of some of those. But that tool is questions. Questions are generative. Questions are generative. They generate new ideas, new thinking, new knowledge, whereas propositions or just statements do not. Consider some propositions. Your happiness largely depends on your choice of career. I think most in here would probably say, oh, there's something there. Okay, that's a statement. Self-sacrifice is a moral ideal. To be good, you must sacrifice. We've heard this a lot. Just a statement. Independent thinking is a fundamental virtue. You should think for yourself. If you don't accept God, you can't have a life of meaning. The proper purpose of government is to protect individual rights. These are just propositions, and whatever their truth value, they may be true, they may be false, but what they're not is generative. They don't get you thinking. They don't take your mind in a new direction. Compare them with these. Here are some questions, related questions. What is happiness? What is a career? How are they connected? You ask those questions, and on the same subject, career, and happiness, your mind starts to move. That's what questions do. They move our minds. What is self-sacrifice? Why is it good? Question that very few people ever ask, at least the second part, why is it good? Um, and what happens when you take a same subject but ask a question about it is your mind starts to move. What is independent thinking? Why is it virtuous? And so on. What is a life of meaning? What is God? Why can't you have a life of meaning without him? Is that true? All of these are questions. And when you ask them, your mind does something that it doesn't do when you don't ask questions. So, question asking is generative. It's a very special kind of tool. Now, not all questions are good questions, or they're not all equally good. Take, can I learn to dance? Well, I mean, there may be some value in this question in some regard, but it's not very constructive. It's just a yes or no question. We're going to talk more about this in a later part of the talk. But compare that to the question, what is the process by which I can learn to dance, or how can I learn to dance? That's not a yes or no question. That points your mind in a different direction. It says, how would I do this thing if I wanted to do it, in effect? That's generative in a better way. Likewise, how can I fit in with the crowd? It's not a really healthy question unless you know the crowd and have good reason to want to fit in, and a whole bunch of other things you would have to ask questions in order to know. So, do any of these people seem interesting and worth my time and friendship and energy? That's a that's a more productive question. That's a healthier question. Who am I to challenge my parents, preachers, and teachers, or tradition, or the like? That's not a constructive question. That's actually a destructive question. It's telling you that your mind is not equipped to ask these kinds of questions and challenge things. Instead, what about what evidence have they offered to support their claims? That's constructive. That's really healthy. If people are going to tell you to do things, or you ought to live this way, you ought to do that, it should be like, okay, why? Where's the evidence? Those questions do something different than the other thinking tools that we have. And that's why I want to focus today on questions. Our theme today is the power of using quality questions self consciously and regularly. Using quality questions self consciously and regularly. We want to get our head around what these things are and then employ them so that we think really deeply, richly, and broadly so that we can understand better how to live and love life. That's the goal. So, we're going to go through a few tools, and here is the first. And all of these are going to be questions. The tools we're looking at today are questions. What kind of life do I want to build? This is a really, really rich question. And I've given a whole talk and written a whole article on this very topic. So I'm not going to get into great detail about it today. But I have to start with this question because, in a sense, it's the most important, broadest, most fundamental question. Is what do I want to do with this life? And very few people, unfortunately, really dig into this question and take it seriously and put in the time to figure out what would make their lives, given their interests, values, needs, context, demeanor, temperament, all of those things, really, really wonderful for them. And this question subsumes or includes, right, a whole bunch of other questions. What matters most to me? What do I want in regard to education, if I'm still in the educational sphere of my life, or career, or friendships, or romance, recreational activities? These are the major areas of life. And asking questions about what you want in those areas is crucial to identifying what you want so that you can know what you want, so you can go after what you want, so you can have that life. If you don't ask these questions, you don't get the answers. And if you don't have those answers, you do not know. You do not know. A lot of people go through life just sort of haphazardly, going for, oh, I feel like doing this now. I may feel like doing that now. If you buckle down and really take these questions seriously, what happens is your mind starts to move and it starts to come up with ideas and thoughts that you hadn't thought before. And you put those together and you can live a really, really wonderful life. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this question today. I just wanted to start with it, but I do want to recommend a few places where you can learn more about how to think about your values and organize them and then build a life that you love. I gave a lecture at last year's conference titled Loving Your Life, a Framework for Flourishing. And it gets into this in some depth, particularly toward the end of that talk. That video is available on YouTube. Just search that title there. I wrote a lengthy article, it's almost a short book, titled Purpose, Value, Hierarchies, and Happiness, which you can find by searching that at The Objective Standard. And Carl Barney, my good friend and the person who has seed funded everything that's going on here with OSI and Level Up, has a brand new book out titled The Happiness Experiment. And in that, he goes into great detail about happiness planning and how to think about your life and integrate your values so that you can live beautifully. And all of these books and articles and lectures, they all involve, as you'll see, question asking. That's how this stuff works. So I highly recommend those for thinking further about that particular question. All right, tool number 2. These two questions, to whom and for what, are some of the most powerful questions you will ever employ. And it's an odd little set of questions. You don't hear people saying this very often. In fact, you probably would only have heard it in one place, and that would have been from philosopher Ayn Rand. She used these two terms or these two questions in the process of her discovery that human life is the standard of moral value. Because in the middle of that induction that got her to that conclusion, she's dealing with the concept of value and trying to figure out, well, what is a value? What does it mean? What's the purpose of values? Why do we need these things? And what she realized and states explicitly is that the concept of value presupposes an answer to these two questions: to whom and for what. The concept value literally has no meaning unless it's attached to an agent or a person and a goal or a purpose. If I just said this thing's a value, and you said, well, to whom and for what? I said, oh, not to anyone or for anything. It's just a value. It wouldn't make any sense at all. There's no there. The concept would be devoid of meaning. Some ideas have meaning only in relation to people and aims, or agents and goals, or however you want to put that. And these 4, good, value, important, and the concept of matters. This matters, right? Or this is important. These they don't mean it. If I said something is important, and you said, well, to whom and for what? And I said, well, not to anyone or for anything. It doesn't make any sense. The reason these are so powerful is because they completely pull the rug out from under the dogmas that so many of us live under in morality. You must do this. You must do that. This is good. That's a value. And if you say to whom and for what, then the answer to that has to go to an agent and a purpose. And then moral concepts and things you should do or must do or the like become meaningful to you for your aims, or maybe meaningful to someone else, maybe meaningful to a country. Individual rights are good. To whom and for what? For the people who live in the country and need freedom in order to live. You can answer that question that way. If you don't ask these questions, to whom and for what, then you just have a floating abstraction, good, value, important, or the like, and it's not connected to reality. So these two questions connect very important concepts to reality when you ask them, if you ask them. So I I won't go on into a great deal of depth on this one either, because we've got some other questions that are gonna hit on the same kind of thing, but from different angles. But just have the standing order. Anytime somebody starts talking about good or value or important or the like, to whom and for what? There's either an answer to those questions or there isn't, and if there is, that's the connection to reality. That's where the good stuff lies, or the errors lie if there's no connection. Tool number 3, the question why. This is a powerful one. Whereas to whom and for what applies very directly to things like good and value and the like. The question why applies to many things. You can say, why did the ball go into the net, right? And there's a why there, right? So there's causal whys in that regard. But I'm talking about moral issues and how to live type issues. And here, the question why is really powerful when it's posed to should or ought or I have to or I must. Why must you? Why ought I do that? You ought to sacrifice for others, we're told from the crib on upward. Why? That question, as Ayn Rand points out in her essay, Faith versus Force, is absolutely unanswerable because there is no reason that you should sacrifice. There's no earthly reason for it. You can say because God said so, or you can give some other reason, but there's no earthly reason to sacrifice. If sacrifice means giving up more important values for your life for the sake of less important values, there's just no reason. So asking the question why is super high leverage because it gets your mind and other people's minds, if you're having a conversation with them about this, thinking in the right direction. Is there a reason for this? Maybe there's not. If there's no reason, why would we do it? Really good stuff. You need to go with the flow, conform, follow the crowd. Don't rock the boat. Why? What's the reason to do that? Is there one? Or you should be a nonconformist. Maybe there are people say, yeah, go against the flow. Do it. Why? Why is that good? What if the thing that people are doing is a good thing? Why would I not do it just because they're doing it? That doesn't make any sense at all. So the question why is just so generative. You must not challenge tradition. Why? You should reject tradition. Why? Billionaires shouldn't exist, we've heard lately. Why? I've got to visit my family for Christmas. Why? Now, if you need to visit your family for Christmas because you love them and it's the thing you want to do, that's a good answer. But if you've got to visit your family for Christmas because, oh, I was taught that I have to honor my parents and family is more important than anything else, regardless of the fact that you don't care to be with your family, that's not a good reason. That means you're going with something being good, like we talked about on the last slide, without it being connected to a to whom and a for what. Either there are reasons or there are not. The question why helps us to see what the answer is. Tool number 4, by what standard? Now, this is a narrowing of the question why. It's getting more specific, but it's a really good specificity. You want to use this a lot. Homosexuality is wrong. By what standard? Things are right and wrong by a standard of right and wrong. Either there's a standard by reference to which homosexuality is wrong or there is not. And if there isn't, then the claim is simply false. Worse, it's actually arbitrary. It doesn't have any meaning at all. Masturbation is wrong. By what standard? Capitalism is good. Maybe. By what standard? Also, what is capitalism? Etc., right? Questions. Socialism is good. What is socialism? What does good mean? Why is good to whom and for what? By what standard? You should never pretend that facts are other than they are. You should never tell a lie. By what standard? Perhaps one of these standards. Because God said so. God's word is the standard. That's why homosexuality is wrong and masturbation is wrong and so many other things are allegedly wrong. Who is God? Where is God? Is there evidence for God? Where did this standard come from? Cultural norms say we should or shouldn't do these things. Why is that the standard? Ayn Rand's word. Ayn Rand said it, therefore we should. Why would I just do something because Ayn Rand said it? My desires, whatever I feel is good, is good. That's what I should do. The factual requirements of human life are the standard. Once you have some standards on the table, or a standard on the table, look what you can do. You can ask some more questions. With a clearly stated standard, we can ask, is there evidence to support the idea that this is the correct standard? Either there is or there isn't. Which one is it? Would you be willing to live by this idea as a matter of unwavering principle? Well, let's look back at this for a second. God's word, whatever God says is good is good. Am I going to live by that? What if God tells me to kill my son? Or to invade a village and kill all the people there? Cultural norms. What if you live in a culture where the norm is to kill Jews or to put women in bags? Ayn Rand's word. What if Ayn Rand said something wrong? Like she disapproved of and thought homosexuality was immoral at one point in her life. And she said so. Okay, well, no, ridiculous. So, my desires, just because I want something. Can you want something that's not good for your life? Obviously. How about the factual requirements of human life and happiness, given the kind of animal we are? Would you be willing to live by this idea as a matter of unwavering principle? Is there any evidence to support the idea that we need to act in certain ways and not in others so that we can live and love our lives? There's a world of evidence to support this. There's nothing but evidence to support this in human life. So asking questions really, really does a lot of work for us. Tool number 5. What is in my control and what is not? This is a really powerful question. Ayn Rand wrote a whole essay titled The Metaphysical versus the Man-Made. You can find it in her book, Philosophy Who Needs It, which I highly recommend. And in that essay, she talks about what is the difference between the metaphysical and the man-made. The metaphysical is that which exists and is the way it is, regardless of anything human beings do, think, say, wish, whatever. So things are what they are. That we can't change that. Wishing doesn't get rid of that. The law of gravity is what it is. We can't affect that. Those kinds of things are metaphysically given facts. The fact that we need certain things in order to live, like, protein and water and sleep and freedom and reason, these are metaphysically given facts. We can't change the fact that that's the case. What can we change? We can change things that are open to human volition. We can decide to act in a different way today than we did yesterday because we learned and realized, oh, if I use my mind this way, I get things better than if I use it the other way. That's where we can make change. We can make change by making choices. Our choices, we're always at a choice point in life. Every now is a choice point. You can't change the past. The past is gone. It's behind you. You can learn from it. You can look back and learn from it, but you can't do anything about it. What you can do things about are the here and now and the future. That's it. Sure. Every moment is a choice point in that way. I call this the choice point perspective. Can't change history. You have no control over other people's choices. You can communicate with people and try to persuade them of things that you think they ought to know, but you can't make somebody else's mind work or make somebody else make good choices. Not in your power. What you control is your choices and only your choices. That's it. But that's a lot. That is a huge thing to control. It's massive. Yes, there's environment and it affects your life. And yes, there are genetics and those affect your life. But there's another thing, and that is your capacity to choose, to think, to activate your mind and decide, I'm going to make an effort, a mental effort to figure this thing out and move in that direction rather than this older direction. That's where we get to make the change. It's really important to know this distinction because a lot of people live in the past. They get hung up on things. Oh my God, I did this bad thing. And it haunts them. And they constantly harp on it and ruminate over it. Oh, and just dwell on it and live in the past. And that's really poison to your life because you can't do anything about it. If you want to look back and learn from the past, that's great. But don't dwell on it. Live. Make choices now and in the future to make your life great. And they say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now, right? You can't change that you didn't do something in the past or that you did do something in the past. But what you can do is take the reins of your mind now and make the best decisions you can. That's your choice point. So, what's in my control and what's not? Nothing is in your control except your choices. That's it. It's a pretty simple answer. But once you get that answer and you realize that the ability to make choices is no small matter, this is massive. You get to do this all the time, every moment of your life. You get to choose whether you're going to focus, activate your mind, do this thing that makes your life the best it can be, or you can rest that, sort of go out of focus, not activate your mind, not make the choice to figure things out and live. And you can even do the really, really bad thing, which is evade, pretend that facts aren't what they are. But that's not something people in this room are likely to do. If you do it, it's really bad for your life, and you figure that out pretty quickly. Why? Because you need to know the facts of reality and keep your mind connected to reality because that's where we live. And if your mind isn't connected to the place you live, it's not efficacious in that place. It's out here doing something else. Doesn't work that way. So anyway, what's in your control and what's not is simply your capacity to choose. Really powerful fact. Tool number 6. Not the question, can I do X, but rather, how can I do X? So I mentioned this earlier, but when I was just introducing the difference between really powerful questions and not so powerful questions. And look, can I do something might have a place in life. There are times that you might ask that, but it's a yes or no answer. And it doesn't tend to help you think about what you might do to make your life better. It's like a dead end. Ayn Rand called this the myth of innate endowment. The premise behind this kind of question. Can I do this? And the idea is sort of like, do I have the special sauce? Was I born with the thing that other people have that makes them able to do this, whether it's, learning math or learning to sail or learning to dance or whatever. Um, and if you ask the question that way, you're kind of embracing the idea that it's either or based on what was innately in you. But that's not true. So that's why it's a bad question. And even if you say, yes, I can do it, you still haven't gotten anywhere. But if instead you say, how can I do this? Your mind starts to work in the direction of the process by which you can do that thing. That's really powerful. And you only get that power if you ask the question. You only get the power if you ask these kinds of questions. So I hope you're seeing an integration here, but the value of certain kinds of questions and the need to set standing orders to think in this way. It's really, really uh, generative. Psychologist Carol Dweck wrote this fabulous book titled Mindset, and she distinguishes in there between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. A fixed mindset is basically, I'm born with all the things I'm able to do, and that's it. It's all static. And a growth mindset is, oh, I can figure things out and learn. If I exert effort, I can do this, and I've done it. And we know that the growth mindset is accurate and that the fixed mindset is false just by looking at our lives and at history. How much have you learned since you were in kindergarten? Can you only do the things today that you were able to do when you were in kindergarten? That's ridiculous. Why? Because you can learn. Your mind is capable of figuring things out and doing new things. But if you don't keep that knowledge fresh in your mind, and if you don't ask the correct questions, not can I do it, but how can I do it, you might find yourself stagnating in life. The how is the opposite of stagnation, right? It's a generative go do it question. It's a can do question. So very important. Tool number 7, and our final tool today. How did I arrive at this conclusion? This is so powerful. This question, not only to ask yourself, but when you're in conversations with others and somebody says something, you're like, I'm not sure that's true. How did you arrive at that conclusion? It's really generative question. What follows when you ask that question is quite amazing. Take take a few conclusions you hear out in the world. Life is suffering. You may have heard this from Jordan Peterson and others. The existentialists had this as sort of one of the centerpieces of their philosophy. It's a pretty common idea. You can't get values from facts. You probably heard that. People are no good and can't be trusted. Capitalism is the cause of the world's problems, right? Any of these kinds of questions are ultimately, or not questions, any of these kinds of statements are conclusions of some sort. And the question is, how did you come to believe this? And as soon as you ask that, your mind starts going, how did I come to believe that? It's in here. I can see it right there in my mind. It's something I believe. But where did it come from? Here are some questions to carry forward with this. Well, did I pick this idea up from my parents, preachers, and teachers? Did I just sort of hear it from them and accept it uncritically? That happens a lot to people. It probably has happened to you to some extent. Certainly happened to me when I was younger. I totally ate hook, line, and sinker the idea that morality equals self-sacrificially serving others. Totally accepted that from my parents, preachers, and teachers. Didn't even occur to me that that might not be the actual meaning of that of morality. You might have heard, as I said, Jordan Peterson saying over and over again, life is suffering. Okay, well, no matter how many times he says that, is it true? Is there evidence to support that idea? You might have accepted ideas just simply through social osmosis. You read stuff in books and you see movies and you hear people on TV talking about things and, oh, well, maybe that's the case. And it just lodges in your mind over time because of frequency. And the question is it true? Or perhaps, did I look at reality, think through the available and relevant facts, and come to the conclusion on the basis of observation, evidence, and logic, right? Not all ways of arriving at conclusions are equal. There's a difference between these, right? Further questions. If we're going to follow this suffering angle, what is suffering? What causes it? Is it the same thing as struggling? Or is there a difference there? Does life involve some of each of these things? Does the fact that life involves some suffering mean that life is suffering? Does any of that make sense if you look at reality? You ask these kinds of questions and all sorts of things start to brighten up. And you realize, oh, there's something wrong with that conclusion. What are values? Why do we need them? What facts give rise to our need of values? When people say you can't get values from facts, you just say, well, all right, why do we need the concept of value? Does it refer to anything? If it doesn't refer to anything, let's throw the thing away and stop using it. There's no point in talking about values if it doesn't have a referent. But if there are certain facts that give rise to our need of the idea of values, those facts are the very facts to which it refers, which means that value refers to fact. This is the whole business of Ayn Rand's bridging the is-ought gap or the fact-value gap. She realized that the concept of value presupposes and depends on not only to whom and for what, but ultimately the existence of a living being that needs to act in a certain way in order to remain alive. That's a fact. Values are precisely the things that living things go after in order to get them so that they can remain alive. And in the case of human beings, not just remain alive, but flourish. That's what values are. They're things we need in order to live. So, and there's much more to Rand's derivation of life as the standard of value, but that's basically what it is. And it's you get this kind of knowledge by asking the right questions. What are values? Why do we need them? those questions are so powerful. They just point your mind in the direction of reality. Either we need them or we don't. Which one is it? What is capitalism? If it's the cause of all the world's problems, what is it? If you look into capitalism, does this thing ban the initiation of physical force from social relationships and say to the government, you may use force only in retaliation and only against those who use them? That's what capitalism actually is. That's why we need the concept capitalism, because that differentiates it from things like a mixed economy and socialism and communism and fascism and theocracy. So that's what capitalism is. And if you ask what capitalism is and you identify what it is, then if you ask the question, okay, if that's what it is, how does banning force from human relationships, how does stopping people from attacking each other and stealing their stuff cause problems? In what way? And could we see an instance of that? Where did the absence of the use of physical force against human beings cause a problem? If you ask these questions, your mind goes looking. And sometimes your mind finds nothing. And if your mind doesn't find anything, it's because there's nothing there, most likely. Now, maybe you're not reasoning accurately yet, but at least you're thinking in the right direction when you ask these kinds of questions. So I hope you can see what happens when you use super high leverage questions. And I hope you'll take this into account as you move forward in life and really employ these things. Oh, I want to quickly summarize what we've discussed, and then we'll take questions for a while. So here are the thinking tools we've discussed. And by the way, I weeded this down from 30 something. It took me forever to do it because I wanted to get a good set. But there's many more. These are not the only ones, right? But here are the 7 that we looked at. What kind of life do I want to build? Ask that question. It will change your life for the better if you pursue the answers to that question. To whom and for what? Have that on the tip of your tongue anytime you hear good, important, anything like that. Because those terms don't mean anything without these questions or without answers to these questions. Why? Why? Always ask. Be like a 3-year-old child with the question why. It's one of the most high leverage questions you can. There are either reasons for things or there are not. Which one is it? By what standard? Make it narrower. Somebody says something is wrong. Okay, maybe. What's the standard you're working with? Either they have one or they don't. If they do, let's look at it. Let's see if it makes sense. What's in my control and what's not? If you don't know that and keep it really fresh in mind, you might waste your time fretting about things you can't do a damn thing about. That is a waste of your life. You don't want to do that. You want to understand this thing so you can go after the things you can shape and change your life, your future in so many ways. Really, really powerful question. Don't ask yourself, can I do this thing? Ask yourself, how can I do this thing if I want to do it? That's how you move forward in life. And then finally, how did I arrive at this conclusion? You want to keep your mind connected to reality. And the only way you can do that is to ask this kind of question regularly, just to make sure that, oh, there are facts that gave rise to this idea. That's why I hold it. It's not just something I heard from, Jordan Peterson or my preacher. So those are the thinking tools I wanted to present today. And with that, we'll go ahead and take a Q&A. Thank you.
Well, very. Hey, I had a senior architect once who said to me, Seamus, there's all these things that I don't think to ask that I don't know, and for you it seems to be a requirement to know this. And the thing I'm curious about is we have all this capacity to ask questions and to make our lives very, very explicit. And yet, it's like 10% of people are using this to like a significant capacity. Humans have this amazing ability to go through their entire lives in a state of drift, evading, and just not using this power that they have. My question is, why are people so good at it? And what is the advantage that people get by not asking questions?
Yeah, So those are really interesting questions, and I'll try to keep this brief. I think the main reason that people don't ask these kinds of questions is twofold. They're not taught the value and importance of asking questions and encouraged to ask questions. A lot of times, kids are being brought up and they ask why, and the parents say, "Because I said so," right? Or the equivalent, or "You're not supposed to ask questions." If God made the universe, who made God? No, Johnny, stop that. You're not supposed to ask questions, right? So we're taught not to ask questions. And I think the reason we're taught not to ask questions, sometimes it's just impatient parents and being impatient, and they shouldn't do that. They should, if you're gonna be a parent, you need to take seriously the business that your job is to help your child learn how to think and live and love life. That's what parenting is about. But the more nefarious reason that people aren't taught to ask questions is because asking questions is selfish. It's selfish. You're trying to figure out what's true. You're trying to figure out why you should do certain things, and all of the irrational aspects in morality get get exposed when the question why or what is the evidence for this, any of those kinds of questions come out. So religions and dogmas of other kinds, whether Marxism or whatever, all of the things that have prescriptive ideas. You should do this. We must do that. We got to redistribute the money. All of these things. There aren't reasons for them ultimately, and so the people who want to protect those ideas don't want anyone asking questions that exposes that fact. So what we need if we want to help ourselves, our kids, and others keep their minds connected to reality is to talk about the importance of asking questions and open up as a part of that for discussion. What is actually the right standard of morality? What is the right morality? Because I think so many people just have the wrong morality in their minds, and it literally undermines their ability to think because it quarantines a whole bunch of things that you're not allowed to ask questions about. Out of not asking questions, what people get is they get to keep their compartmentalizations. They get to keep, "Oh, yeah, morality is about giving up things and sacrificing and not living." Over here, self-development and living and trying to live and love life, that's all about what actually works given the kind of being I am and all of that. Those things are not together in people's minds, but they should be. They should be the exact same question. Morality is supposed to be a guide to living, not a guide to dying. It's supposed to be a guide to living and loving and enjoying life, and what people are taught is the opposite. So what they get is they get to keep those compartmentalizations without challenging their parents, preachers, and teachers and the norms and traditions that they were raised in. But we need to challenge those things. We need to challenge them not for the sake of challenging them. We need to challenge them to see if they're true. And then if they're not true, we need to find out what is true. So, this isn't a you must without a if you want. It's a you must. We must challenge these things if we want to keep our minds connected to reality and live. So it all comes back to that. But anyway, good question. I probably went on a little longer than I should there.
Hi, Craig. So as someone who loves to argue with people, online and in real life, do you think these tools are more an introspective tool, or can these be used polemically? I ask because a lot of times when I do talk to people who usually disagree with me, I sort of implicitly was using a lot of these tools, and whenever I do, a lot of them usually dismiss it as if I'm trying to lecture to them because a lot of it sounds like, oh, you're just you're just trying to tell me this whole lecture or thing. You're not trying to argue with me on like any facts or anything like that. You're just trying to, preach to me essentially. So do you think that these are useful tools for polemics, or do you think you should probably only use these for introspection? Are you thinking there's like a different set of tools that you can use to sort of spread the ideas and, challenge these types of people?
Yeah. So I would say that they are both introspective and extrospective in different ways. And I think you should use them both primarily in your own mind and your own thinking, but also in conversations. Now, you don't have to be unreasonably confrontational with people, but you want to help them get on the boat with you of, hey, let's figure out what's true. So, introspection is things like, how did I arrive at that conclusion? That is thinking about what did I do in my mind to come to that conclusion. There's something definitely introspective about that. one of the questions that I took out, one of the ones that almost made the cut, are the two introspective questions. What do I feel and why do I feel it? Those are really important introspective questions. But also, what do I think and why do I think it is that? And that's sort of the same thing as how did I arrive at this conclusion? But they're also extrospective. You're looking out, why should I sacrifice? What is the fact out there that means I should? Where is it? Show it to me. That's extrospective. So I don't think these are segregated that way, or I think they go both ways. It depends on how you're using them. And I do think that you should employ these in conversations with people. I think it's helpful to them if you care about the people that you're engaging with and you want to help them better themselves and keep their minds connected to reality. Talk to them about the questions. You can say, "Hey, it's really helpful to ask these kinds of questions." And if you explain it carefully and clearly and empathetically rather than dogmatically or something, um, I think a lot of people perk up and they go, That's pretty interesting. Let's toy with it. Let's ask the question. By what standard? Take that question and then say, where do we get this idea from that God's will is the standard or that social consensus is the standard? And if somebody doesn't want to talk about that stuff, let them go. Don't push it on them. And that doesn't mean they're necessarily bad people. It might be they're just not philosophically, Sarah and I go dancing a lot. We know a lot of people who dance, and they're fun-loving, good people. I don't have to get into discussions about how we know what we know with them. I can just have that other kind of relationship. So there's no obligation to get into that with people. But use it with the people who you think might be open to or active-minded enough to think about these things. That's who you want to engage with that way. Yes.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Daniel from my Ryan Center, Ukraine. So, my question is, I mean, you gave a wonderful speech about asking questions, right? How you ask them properly, how you formulate them, which are good and bad questions. The question I have, how do you answer them? And the reason why I'm asking it, because in philosophy, we have like for 1,000 years the same questions, right? People ask what's good, what is bad, what is morality, and there's like hundreds of philosophers who answer it in different ways. So is there a set of tools, not precisely the answers, of course you will not give me the answer what is good or what is bad, but the set of tools how to make a right conclusion? Because in the logic, for example, right, there's a set of tools that you have two syllogism and there's basically outcome of it, and it's usually going to be true. So my question is how to answer this, how to use these tools correctly and how to answer questions correctly.
It's a good question, and you could write a whole book on how to answer questions correctly, right? That's difficult. But I'll just say a few words on this that may be helpful. So, yeah, there's thousands of years of philosophy and a lot of people asking the same kinds of questions. But then every once in a while, there's a new question, and those new questions do a lot of heavy lifting. John Locke asked some new questions about why do we need this concept of rights? And he was sort of looking at reality and trying to figure out, and he had a mixed answer. It was, oh, well, we're God's property, and so only he can, tell us what to do. But he had another answer in that same book, the Second Treatise, where he said, also, if someone takes something in nature that isn't yet a value and turns it into a value, that kind of belongs to him because he made it happen. Well, that's exactly the basis for property rights. He got that right. So he had two different answers in the same book. One of them was right, one of them was dreadfully wrong. So asking those kinds of questions brought something new to light. And so what you want to do in the history of philosophy is look for the people who asked the new questions and came up with the better ideas. These questions, some of the questions I asked here just come straight from Rand. To whom and for what? That's one of the pivot points in Rand's induction of life as the standard of value. If she had never asked that question, we would not know that life is the standard of value unless somebody else asked that question. But you won't find in the history of philosophy that question. That I've never seen it. So if somebody can point out a philosopher who did ask it, but we don't know of one that did. And if someone had, they probably would have discovered this before Rand did, because that starts pointing your mind right in that in the correct direction. So the way to answer these questions is to be super active-minded and play with the ideas a lot. It's not thinking is not a straight line where you just get everything right all the time. It's a very curvy line with dips, and it's sort of like the stock market. It goes up and down. And you have to be patient and active-minded, and what you're looking for is things to make sense, which means literally to make it to the sensory level, to the perceptual level. That's what it means for an idea to make sense. Or if you want to understand an idea, you're trying to know what ideas stand under it and connect it to reality. And that's what you're looking for. So when you're playing with the questions, that's the direction you want your mind to go.
Uh, Hi, great. I'm Sarah. Thank you for your talk. I love your sessions because I always feel like I have more homework to do. Well, there's a general idea that philosophy brings doubt, and so you usually feel confused. But I agree that with you that thinking and the questions is a good way to get answers, and you can find happiness there. But I think that there is a process between point A point A that you ask the question and point B that you get the answer. And I think this process sometimes is painful and you usually feel confused and lost during this process. So what would you recommend to overcome this process, especially when we are talking to people that they don't see the long-term goals that you can achieve?
So yeah, how do you avoid the pain and the fatigue of the learning process? You go from point A to point B, and sometimes you're trying to uproot false premises. Maybe you were raised in an extremely religious family, and you've been taught that you don't ask questions and sacrifice is good. That kind of thing. Is that what you mean?
No, I don't mean to avoid the pain because I don't think you can avoid it. But I mean, for example, if you are questioning that you don't want to fit in your group because you you, you I don't know, you say my friends are not acting like uh with reason, according to reason, and but the pain is that you will lose your friends. So between that process that you realize that this is what I don't want in my life to I don't want these friends, but there is a process between that because emotions are involved. So
Okay, got it, got it. How so the example is, if you've got a friend who's been a friend for a while and you've got a lot of emotional connection, but then you're starting to realize that this friendship is not ideal for you. This person isn't thinking rationally or doing things. And how do you sort of break away from that and make this change? Yeah, look, your values and your emotions are very powerful things, and it takes a while. There's a lag time between your new knowledge and the emotions that your old premises are still holding on to, and it takes a while for that to sort of come around and reconcile. And you have to be patient with yourself. But I think the whole thing involves more question asking. Ask, what is friendship? What do I want out of friendship? What is this friendship like right now? Do I think this person is capable of leveling up with me and thinking in a new way and maybe learning how to reason? Maybe I can have a conversation with him or her and say, "Hey, you did this thing and it really bothered me because I thought that it acted against what I regard as virtue. You were dishonest here, or you did something really irrational that I think was dangerous, or whatever." Have that conversation and see if you can fix the friendship and help that person up. If you care about the person sufficiently, then it may be worth that time. But you also have to be willing to walk away from relationships. If a relationship is genuinely not good for your life, if it's toxic, if is dragging you down in some way, you need to get out of that relationship. And that can feel difficult and it can be sad, but you still need to sort of muster the courage and the conviction to do it. So there's no silver bullet to make it easy to make difficult change. Difficult change is difficult and it exists to part of life. So but do ask questions and be patient both with yourself and with people you love until there's good reason to stop being patient, in which case you just have to say, "Hey, I'm done." I've lost plenty of friends in life, and in all cases that I did, I'm glad of it. Doesn't mean that while it was happening, it wasn't painful, but looking back, when I had to say goodbye to someone, there was good reason, and I'm glad I did it, and I think you'll find that as well.
Hi, Greg. Great talk.
Okay.
I believe that asking the right kinds of questions completely saved my life because I grew up in a religious household and in a religious community, and I hadn't questioned anything for a decade almost. And not until I was in my late teens then I started to question things, and things got a lot better. My question for you is, through my process of asking all those questions, I found myself asking too many questions at some point, where I found myself spinning my wheels to the point of analysis paralysis. How do you
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this, and how do you identify when you might be asking too many questions that might actually be getting in the way and wasting your own time?
Yeah, really. So one of my questions that didn't make the cut is it time for action? Right? It's really and then I had another thing called, the knowledge action gap. And for the knowledge action gap, that's like the example of that would be you want to lose weight. And the question is, do you know how to lose weight? Does anyone in here know what you would need to do to lose weight? Like everyone knows, right? Yet, a lot of people who want to lose weight don't take those actions to do it. That's the knowledge action gap. And what you need is a bridge. You need to bridge those things and do it. Um, and so at some point you've just got to act on what you know. And analysis paralysis, just constantly reviewing things. Put it this way: I've worked with a lot of people who want to learn how to write, as do you. You and I work together on this stuff, right? And a lot of people will be like, "Okay, to learn how to write, I'm going to read a lot of books on how to write," and that can be helpful. There's nothing wrong with learning through people telling you what to do. But if you want to learn how to write, what do you have to do? Ultimately, right? You have to write. You have to put the pen to the page and do the thing called writing. Likewise for riding a bicycle. If you sat around and read a book all the time about riding a bicycle, you can never learn how to ride a bicycle. So you have to act. Life is action. Life is a process of self-generated, goal-directed, self-sustaining action. That's what it is. So action is crucial. Thinking is a kind of action, but you also need existential action. You need to get out and do things. So I don't have an answer to where and when and how to make that decision that now it's time to act, because it's so contextual. But you have to remember that your time is limited. Every moment that passes is gone forever. So you want to say, am I confident enough now that I can turn to action in this thing, and then be willing to fail. Look, failure the only way that failure is bad is if you don't learn from it. Now, it depends on what kind of failure you're talking about. If you fail to stop at the stop sign and you get killed, that's a different kind of thing. But what I mean by failure is, the kind of failures you learn from, right? Those are good. They're not bad, and you want to be able to experience those. So act. Do a lot of thinking and get out in the world and take action and be willing to fail and learn from experience. That's how we grow. And it's okay to fail.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.